Hey friends, Andrea here. For today's video, I am going to be knitting a spa head wrap or a spa headband, and I have some yarn here. This is Bernat Pipsqueak. I just pulled this out of my stash, and I have this in the white. I also have it in this kind of I don't know, turquoise color, but in small amounts. But I might end up using that to make a couple of them. And then I have this really old fabric or yarn called Polar Spun by Lion Brand. And as you can see by the label, this is very, very old. I think I have purchased this maybe in 2000 or even before then. But it's a similar texture of yarn, so I was just kind of trying to show you the type of yarn or the texture of yarn that you could use for this. Essentially, you want something that's going to be super duper soft and maybe even a little bit absorbent, but you don't necessarily need it to be really water absorbent like a towel. You just want it to not I guess not be like wool or cotton and be scratchy against your skin. So for this yarn on the Bernat, it has a needle recommendation of a US size 10.5. And if I go to the back side and look at what I should be getting, if I am using this yarn and it's a bulky weight yarn, it says that to get a 4" by 4" square or 10 by 10 centimeter square, I would knit 11 stitches and 16 rows on a US size 9, and that is 5.5 millimeters. What I have here is a 9 millimeter needle, and I'm going to, a pair of needles, and what I'm going to do is double the yarn, and I'm going to hold two of my yarns together. So in this case, I want to hold together the white, maybe I'll just do two of the white for this example. And then knowing that doubling the yarn and using thicker gauge needles, I'm going to need to decrease my number of stitches and my number of rows to get that 4 inches. So what I'm trying to do is get a gauge swatch that will be about big enough around to fit on my head or any adult, I guess adult person's head. My head is about 21 inches around, and most adults' heads are between 21 and 24 inches. So it will stretch when I knit it, but I just want to make sure that I'm not making it so big that it doesn't fit or doesn't stay on. So I'm just trying to give you some background information about what I am trying to do before I get started. And if you have a similar type of yarn, you may need to knit a swatch and count how many stitches and rows that you are creating if you're going to make this, because your yarn may not give you the exact same dimensions, and everybody knits differently. In my case, I knit really tightly, so the stitch or swatch that I make might not turn out the way that yours turns out. If you crochet, it could be a totally entire different gauge, so that's something that you might need to experiment with as well. This yarn is 100% polyester, and it is a machine washable yarn because it's designed to be for babies. So I just wanted to point that out. Usually baby yarns or baby style of yarn or fiber is going to be machine washable and machine dryable, so that's kind of what I was looking for, something I could just throw in and wash. So what I'm going to do is get my yarn onto my needles, and I'll show you how I do that, and then I'm going to start knitting. Like I said, I'm going to decrease my number of stitches by half, I think, to start with, and see if that still gives me, I still want to get a 4" wide band because I think that's appropriate for my head for the headband, and then I'm just going to knit until I get a kind of long tube that's long enough to go around my head. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I have 2 balls of yarn here, and I just took that same yarn and wound it into 2 small balls, and to be honest with you, I already had it wound into these 2 balls, so I didn't have to do anything extra. These were something that was left over from another project. But I am holding them together, and then I'm going to make basically like a circle and overlap my yarn over my fingers here. And then I'm going to reach into the loop and pull my top yarn, so the yarn that I layered over top, and I'm grabbing it, and I'm gonna just pull it through my hole, and I made a little loop, and I'm going to place my knitting needle onto that loop and then tighten it down to get just, and not too tight for this first row, this base row, and there's a little bit of crud in my yarn, like just probably a thread from something else. So I'm not tightening it too far down because I still want to be able to get that other needle in to this hole. But I am going to go ahead and create a few more knots. Like I said, I wanted to double or shrink the number of stitches in half. So I'm going to cast on a few more stitches with the same yarn, and the gauge swatch on that yarn said I needed to cast on 11 stitches to get a 4-inch swatch. So I'm going to cast on half that number. In this case, I'm going to cast on 6. So I just made a loop with my finger and then pulled my needle behind the loop and put it on my needle. So I've got 3, including the cast on, and that's 4, that's 5, and that's 6. So I have my 6 stitches. I moved my needle with the live stitches onto my left hand because I am right-handed knitter, and I happen to knit by throwing is the way it's been described. There's another style of knitting that people hold their yarn in their left hand, but that's not how I knit or am comfortable knitting. So what I'm going to do is try to find the first stitch and insert my needle from my right hand underneath that stitch from front to back and push it through, and then I'm taking my working yarn and I'm wrapping it around the loop, and then I'm going to I kind of use my finger to push off and pull the yarn through that loop that I wrapped around my needle. I'm pulling it through that first loop, and then I have this extra kind of hanging off here. I'm just going to push it off because that's my first stitch. So I'm just going to do that with the rest of the stitches here. And if you need to watch this in slow-mo, or if you want to find other knitting tutorials on how to knit, I just kind of want to show you how I make this so you can follow along. So I've done my first stitch. I'm going to do my second. My third. And I'm trying to keep my stitches kind of loose. My fourth stitch. My fifth, and this is my last. My final stitch is number 6. And it looks like that's the first row done. And of course, I'm just swatching this, so if this turns out to be too narrow, or if the stitches need to be I need to knit more stitches, then I'll just do a couple of rows and I'll find that out. So I've done 1 row in addition to my cast on row, and I'm just going to keep doing that, knitting another row and another row, because on the yarn ball it's suggested to do 16 rows to get a 4-inch square. So what I'm going to do is do half of that, which is 8 rows. So I've done basically 1 so far. So I'm going to do the other 8 and come back, and I'll show you how wide my swatch looks after that, or how long it looks. Okay guys, so I finished this swatch, and this is 8 rows it doesn't look like it, but it is 8 rows, and it's 6 stitches across and 8 rows long. So I'm gonna just measure this with my T-square, and it is not quite 4 inches. It's about 3 1/4, 3 1/2. And then as far as length goes, I'm just gonna measure it from where the knitting needle is, and it's not even close to 4 inches. It's about 2 1/2, maybe 2 1/2 inches. So I'm okay with the width actually not being 4 inches, because I think this will be fine to go around my head as a headband for a spa headband, and I don't know that I would want it to be 4 inches. But I don't think I would want it any thinner than that. It's a nice thick material. And what I think I'm just going to do is, based on the fact that this is 8 stitches, and if I hold my ruler up here, 8 rows, sorry, to get about 2 1/2 inches. So if we do some math calculations, we'll be able to figure out how many stitches we need to get to equal the right number of inches to fit on my head, which is 21 inches. If you needed it to be stretched out to fit another person's head who has a bigger head, you probably don't need to go too much bigger than this if this was your gauge, based on the fact that this yarn does have quite a bit of stretch. It could stretch and fit on someone else's head if it really needed to, but you don't want it to be really tight and uncomfortable. So you probably want to find like a slightly smaller size, maybe an inch shorter than what your head calls for, but you don't want to go too big and then have it just be on there super loose and just kind of fall off. So I did some quick math. I'll just show you my math. 8 rows is equal to 2 1/2 inches, approximately. So 8 divided by 2.5 is going to be equal to 3.2, and that I wrote stitches, but I crossed it out and wrote rows. 3.2 rows per inch. So every time I make 3 and a little under 1/4 rows, it's equal to 1 inch of length. So 3.2 times 20, which is the number of inches I want it to be, because remember, I want it to fit my head at 21 inches, but I don't want it to slide off, and it has plenty of stretch. If I'm holding the ruler here and I pull this, it easily stretches an extra inch, and that's when it's only about 2.5 inches long. And if I wanted to, I could really stretch it out. The more length that you add, the more rows that you add, probably the more give it will have. So look, if I measured it now, it's at 3 inches. So that definitely alters what it will give me if I am calculating it based on the stretched out measurement. So it might also be a good idea to stretch out your yarn, your swatch a little bit before measuring it, just to see if that changes what your calculation is going to be. So based on that calculation of 3.2 rows times 20 inches, which is what I want my total length to be, it says that I need to knit 64 rows. I'm going to go ahead and start knitting the rest of this swatch. I'm going to just keep going because I don't need to cast on any more stitches. I think I'm happy with this. And I'm going to check in with you at 50 rows and see what it looks like, because I want to make sure that it will fit around my head, and I want to measure it with you guys. I just wanted to quickly check in and let you know that I knit 20 rows, and then I stretched it out a little bit, and then I measured it, and I got 6 inches. That's kind of approximate, but 6 inches, when I do the math and divide that 20 rows by 6 inches, my math is still pretty close. It's 3.3 inches. So, 3.3 rows per inch. So I feel like I'm on the right track. I'm going to keep going. Just another quick check-in. I'm at 40 rows here, and I measured it, and it's just about 12 inches. So I think my calculations still hold, and I'm going to keep going till I have about 60 rows. So that should get me pretty close to the length I need it to be, and I love this texture so far. Feels very thick and luxurious already. So I finished my 60 rows, and by my calculations it should be 64 rows, and I think I'm gonna go ahead and keep going with this just because I put it on, or I kind of wrapped it around and put it around my head, and it is just a little bit too tight on me. And if I fold it in half and kind of measure, that gives me about, I don't know quite what I would say that would be, about 8.5, almost 9 inches there. If I double that, that's only about 18 inches. So I do want to go ahead and that was like, I was stretching it out quite a bit. So I don't think I want to wear it that tight around my head. So I'm going to go ahead and knit a few more rows, like I said, and then I'm going to just keep trying it on until it fits without having to be stretched super tight around my head. I am back. I knit 68 rows. So this is what it kind of looks like. It's all quadrupled over itself. And 68 rows seems to be appropriate. And when I did my math before, I was calculating 64 rows to get a 20-inch body or length, and to get, my head is about 21 inches, like I said, so to get about 21 inches, I could do another 3 to 4 rows. And it's very possible that I forgot to count one of the rows because I was watching a video while I was knitting, so it may not have been exactly 68. It could have been 67 or 65, something like that. But it's done now, and what I'm going to do is stitch or cast off this edge and then stitch these two edges together. But I'm not done, because what I want to do is make a little bow for the front of it. I think that bow look is really cute, and I'll show you how I attach my little bow. And to make the bow, I'm just going to make another rectangle like this, and instead of knitting it the whole way solid, I'm going to knit and then start decreasing, get it skinnier in the middle, and then knit increasing, and then get it back to the same number 6 stitches. And then I will just kind of attach that little center bit to the middle where my seam is going to be, and then I will be able to just kind of wrap it like this, and wrap it with some yarn and kind of attach it in the center so that it kind of has like a turban look. That's what I'm trying to accomplish. So I'm going to go ahead and cast off. You can watch YouTube videos or other video tutorials that show you how to cast off. I'm just going to show you how I do it. And to cast off, I'm going to just insert my needle in. I'm going to knit my first stitch. And I tend to knit this stitch pretty loosely. And then I'm going to knit my second stitch. Again, just knitting kind of loosely. And then I'm going to take my first stitch and insert my needle from kind of front to back-ish, but like just underneath that first stitch. And then I'm just going to pull it over and make sure that I don't lose that other stitch, but I'm just going to pull it over that second stitch. I'm just going to keep doing that to cast off the rest of the stitches. So knit a stitch, so I have 2 on my right hand needle, and then pull the loop over. And these ones are a little bit tight, so I'm just going to try and stretch them out a little bit. So pull the loop over, and that's my second stitch casted off. I'm going to keep going, and then I will show you the finished cast off and how I stitch it together. So I have my last little loop from my cast off, and to finish this I'm just going to pull the yarn through, and I've trimmed the end, so I've cut off the end. It's not attached to the yarn balls anymore, so I'm just pulling it through, and then when I pull it tight, it's going to be a knot there. So I am going to, I did you know, kind of leave a tail here so that way I can stitch this together. So I decided to make it a little easier on myself, and I'm not going to use a needle. I'm going to use a crochet hook. I'm just going to match up these two ends here and insert my needle or my hook on the side that doesn't have a long tail, just that short little starting point. So I'm just going to insert, and sometimes when you use a crochet hook and you're working with some fluffy yarn like this, it's really hard to find that first stitch. So just do your best. It doesn't have to be exact and perfect. And then I'm just going to insert, well, if I can, I'm going to insert my hook there. But I'm going to go ahead and grab just at least the long tail working end and pull my yarn, wrap my yarn around my crochet hook and just pull it through both loops. And that way I can kind of stitch, a slip stitch is what it's called. Slip that stitch together and stitch it all the way together. I'm going to just insert my hook into that working yarn and pull it through my loop that I made from the first pushing through the working fabric. So I'm going to do the same thing and find my second loop and my second loop here, and I'm just doing the best I can. It's not going to be perfect. I'm pulling my loop through, and then I'm going to pull this loop through the first one, and now I have kind of started to create a seam here. So I'm going to do the second loop, find that second loop here, and just kind of feeling it out, pulling it through, making a loop, and then I'm pulling it through that first stitch. If you were knitting a garment, or crocheting a garment rather, and you didn't really want that seam to show, this would not be the stitch to use, but you know, it's just going to be the one that I'm using for today because it seems to be working pretty good for me. And I'm going to do this last little loop here, and then I'll be done with my seam. And I think I'm just done here, so I'm going to just pull this all the way through and tighten it down. So that seamed it up, and there is a little bit of a seam, but this, like I said, this yarn is really forgiving and it's not that obvious that it's there. Besides that, I know that I am going to be coming in with my bow and putting it right on top of this seam, so I'm not all that concerned about that. So I'm gonna stop right here and leave my ends because I might need these ends to tie my bow on, so I'm gonna leave them at least this one end long, and I purposefully cut about 20 inches or so of length to give myself plenty to work with. But now I'm gonna go ahead and knit my bow part, so I'll show you. I'm gonna cast it on the same way as I started the first one, 6 stitches with the yarn held doubled on my same needles, and then I'm going to just knit probably an inch or two, so maybe like 7 or 8 rows. So I'll be right back. Alright, I have my 6 rows here, and what I'm gonna do is start decreasing, and I'm gonna decrease this row by 2 stitches. I'm just gonna knit 2 together, and then I'm gonna knit 2 together on the end, or slip knit. So I'll go ahead and start this. So I'm just gonna insert my needle into the first 2 stitches. So I need to make sure I catch the first stitch and push it all the way through into the second stitch at the top. And it might be a little hard to see that, but I need to make sure that I get both of them. And then I'm gonna wrap my yarn and pull a loop through, and then I'm pulling the 2 stitches off, and then I'm gonna knit my next stitch. I'm gonna knit my next stitch, and now I have 3 stitches on my right hand and 2 on my left, and in this case I'm going to slip, slip, and then knit the 2 slipped stitches together. It just gives it a different look. So I'm slipping it, I'm slipping it, and then I'm putting my left hand hook or needle into from the bottom, and this is a little tricky sometimes, from the bottom up into that double stitch, and then I'm going to wrap the yarn and make a loop and then pull those 2 stitches off. So now I should only have 4 stitches because I decreased by 1 on each end. So I'm going to go ahead and knit another plain row because I just decreased and I don't want to decrease immediately following that, so I'm just going to knit another plain row. So that would have been row number 7, and this is row 8. So now I'm on row 9, and I am also going to do the same step. Row number 9, I'm going to knit 2 together. See if I can get my needle through. It's a little hard to get it through sometimes when I knit really tightly. So got that. Alright, 1 done, and then I'm going to slip, slip, knit these other 2, the last 2. Slip, slip, and then it's tricky. I'm going to see if I can get it through here. There we go. And then knit. Okay, so I have my 2 there, and that was row 9. I'm going to go back and knit row 10, and I'm just knitting the stitches that I just decreased. So I have 2 stitches now. So already we can see that looks kind of like a bow, right? And if I was to put this on the front here, it's totally going to look like a bow when I stitch it together. So I just completed row 10, and now I'm going to be doing row 11, and I want to go ahead and increase now. There's several different ways to increase, and there's not like one particular way that's going to be better for this project. So if you have a favorite way of increasing, I would do that. I tend to just do knit through the front and the back of the loop if it's my choice, because I feel like that's a little more comfortable for me. So I'm gonna knit through the front of the loop, and then I'm gonna bring my knitting needle back and knit through the back of the loop, and knit a second stitch out of the same stitch. So I should end up with 2 stitches here, and I do, and then I'm going to push this one off, and I'm just going to follow the same steps for this second stitch. So I'm knitting through the front, and I try to keep my stitches kind of loose so I can do this, and then I'm going to knit through the back. So I have 4 stitches again, and I'm not going to increase. I'm going to, and that was row 11, so I'm going to knit on my even row, row 12. I'm just going to knit all of my stitches that I just added on, and I should have 4 stitches. Okay, and now I'm going to increase again through the front and the back on the last stitch. So front and back. If I wasn't using this kind of yarn, where the texture is very forgiving of all of that, the stitches that I'm creating, I probably would use a different increase method. So I'm just knitting these 2 in the middle, and then I'm going to increase on that last stitch. But because this yarn is almost like kind of gives like a fur or a terry cloth texture, all of that stitch definition is kind of lost. So it hides imperfections, we'll say. And I'm going to go ahead and knit that next row. So this would have been row 14 now. And I'm at 6 stitches again. Okay, so now that I'm at 6 stitches again at row 14, I can do my 6 more rows to get the rest of my bow fluffy and back to that same width. So I'm going to do that now. So I finished my bow, and that ends up being 20 stitches, or sorry, 20 rows. And I'm going to do my cast off again super loose. And I'm going to leave a bit of a tail, probably like 10 inches. Okay, so I finished the bow, and I'm going to attach it here. If you haven't guessed by now, I am completely winging this, and I don't really have a game plan. I'm just kind of experimenting. But what I do want to do on this end is kind of weave in my tail. So I'm going to do that with my crochet hook, and I'm not doing anything super fancy here. I'm just going to be pulling, oops, I'm going to do it this way, I think. I'm going to be pulling the yarn around here just to try and get it kind of tucked in a little bit more into my stitches. And this probably isn't the best way to do it, if I'm being honest with you. There are probably ways of doing it that will hide it better, but right now I just kind of want to finish it off and get that part done, because I want to put it together. I'm going to weave in the other end, and I did leave a little bit of a tail, but I think I'm just going to cut off maybe like 4 inches, cut it down, and just weave that part in, so I don't need that extra. Just so I can get this kind of tied down. And what I plan to do is I have this long piece here and this shorter piece here, and I plan to just kind of stick the bow on top and then tie it, and then that's kind of all that's going to be holding it in place. It's not going to really be stitched. I could always stitch it together later, but what I was going to do is just go around with my extra yarn and just kind of wrap it tightly, and then knot it kind of on the back side. So that is my game plan, and we'll see how it works out. So I'm just going to weave this part in, and we'll be back. So the seam that I crocheted is on this side, and that's going to be my inside. And then my bow, I'm going to just put it down here. Basically, I just fold it in half, figure out where the middle is, and kind of place it where that seam is going to be. And then I'm just going to use this extra yarn to start wrapping. I am going to leave this tail here so I can tie it off when I'm done wrapping. So wish me luck. So I'm just going to go ahead and loop it around here and tighten it a little. I'm not trying to break the yarn. I'm just trying to tighten it down. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep wrapping it like that. And I don't want it to be a super bulky knot or something. Just kind of want to get it on there really good and kind of cinch it down. So that looks like, I think that's good. I'm going to go ahead and use this remaining piece that was there from the starting point. This is the very tail end that I started with when I cast on. I'm just going to tie that in a knot. And it'll be kind of hidden in the fabric there. So now that I've knotted it, I think I'm going to just try and weave the ends in to the body of this. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then I'll show you how it looks at the end. So we are finished. This is the finished spa headband with a little bow on the top. it is so cute. I did not expect it to turn out that cute, honestly. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. I was just like, let's have a go at it. But it turned out super cute. And I like to wear face masks on Sundays. I call it self-care Sundays. When I do my face masks, I'm always trying to put like a headband around my head to kind of keep the mask stuff off of my hair. And not that I have a lot of hair, but I thought that I would just go ahead and make myself one of these ones because I keep seeing them. So I thought to myself, well, I have some yarn that's really thick and fluffy and it could work as that type of headband. So I figured I would just give it a shot and do an experiment. And it turned out like a million times better than I thought it would. And I really can't wait to go ahead and wear it on Sunday when I do my self-care Sunday. But when I'm wearing it, I will feel very luxurious and very cute. Anyway, I'm super happy with how this came out. I think I would try it again with one of these other colors, and it might even look really cute to do if I'm holding two yarns together, to do one blue and one white. So I might do another one and see if that turns out cute, and maybe I can give that as a gift to someone. I might try doing it with this pink. I think pink and white together would be also really, really cute. And if you guys decide to try this project out and use yarn from your stash or go out and buy yarn, make sure you're purchasing yarn that is machine washable and machine dryable. And maybe if you give it a try, you can let me know. Tag me if you create something like this, and let me know how you go. If you come up with a better way of doing it, that's awesome. And if you decide to use it for selling it or something like that, please just give me credit for the pattern, since I just literally made it up as I was recording. But it is directly from my own brain. I didn't look at any patterns. I just used a basic stitch, honestly, but it was my idea based off of sewn cloth headbands that I've seen on like Amazon and Etsy. Just let me have a little bit of copyright for my own ideas as an artist. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed, and definitely like and subscribe if you are enjoying my content, and it helps my channel be seen by more people. So thank you so much for watching. Bye!